decisions made, from the pitch to the deals I stayed. Slide tackles and boardroom battles.
I'd like to introduce you to our panel today. Davie MacKinnon, obviously, here on the left wing. Gordon Smith in the middle there. Gordon, how are you? And Tony Higgins. Another Jags man after my own heart. In you come. Grab a seat. You always know where the warrants are, the ones that sit at the back, that if maybe get warrants out for them, you can do a runner very quickly. Guys, welcome. Thanks today. Exits are up there. At the end, we'll do the Q&A at the end of our discussion here that we're going to have, so keep your questions for then, by all means. And take photos, whatever. We'll do all that at the end of the day. And the first thing I want to do is introduce Davie MacKinnon. It's his fault we're here today, and let him tell you a wee bit about what we're going to do.
Welcome to everyone. Greatly appreciate your attendance. And I'm absolutely delighted that two of my good friends, guys I've known for the whole of my football career, are here. Gordon Smith. We actually briefly played at Rangers for about a month when he came up on loan at Brighton. Played in the cup final against Celtic and then disappeared again. Yeah. And Gordon and I, and Tony, basically have played for the famous Jupiler Plumperson football team. You probably know them, the charity team. And Tony Higgins, I had the pleasure of playing with Tony at Partick Thistle. And one of the things about these two guys is that they had great careers after their football career. And indeed, they're probably the most intelligent players that I've ever had the pleasure of playing with, because, believe me, as 20 years as a professional and 15 years as a chief executive, I've met a lot of players, and these two are the exception to the rule, to be perfectly honest. I'll give you a couple of examples. When I was at Rangers, Jock Wallace was the manager, and I had a knee injury, and I got my knee opened up, and a week after that I'm on the treatment table on a Friday, and Jock comes in and says in a big loud stage whisper, "Craig Patterson's injured, we're playing Celtic tomorrow. Are you fit, Davie?" And the physio said, "He's only had an operation a week ago." "Aye, it's Celtic though, Davie, you'll play, won't you?" He says, "And your contract's up at the end of the year, so it's up to you." I said, "Aye, okay." So anyway, he says, "Right, come in tomorrow." So I go in on the Saturday, we're in the dressing room. The doctor is called me into the treatment room and giving me an injection in my knee. And I come into the dressing room and Jock announces the team, and I'm playing centre back. And B.J. Ranty's sitting beside me, and he says, "Thought you were injured." I said, "I am." I says, "But the doctor gave me a cortisone injection." "How are you getting a club car and I'm not getting one?" And I said, "All right, very well." And the other thing is, like, just need to travel within the Rangers dressing room. There's others. We played against Liverpool in a pre-season friendly, and it was the old Ibrox tunnel. It's not the kind of soft way it is now. It was concrete, and we're all lined up. They had a great team, Souness, Dalglish, Alan Hansen, Grobbler, they're all there, and I'm looking, seeing all these guys, and basically all we hear is clip, 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 studs on concrete, and Souness shouts, "Oi, Nickel!" Stevie Nickel, "Nickel, have you got metal studs on?" I went, "Aye." "Are you daft? They've got electric undersoil heating. You'll electrocute yourself. Go and get your rubbers on." "Aye, okay." So he disappears and put rubber boots on. So that's the kind of guys that you deal with in football. And as I say, these two guys are exceptional, and they've done really, really well after their career. There's Gordon, as you probably know, has done everything. He's been assistant manager, coach. He's been the SFA chief executive. All-round good guy. And Tony has done a similar route. Tony, actually, I think you went to university when you were at Partick Thistle. at Morton. So anyway, but he was planning on that when he was at Partick Thistle with Bertie Auld and wee Bertie.
Wee Bertie encouraged me.
So wee Bertie, we were playing Rangers at Ibrox, and Tony didn't have the best 45 minutes of his career. And so Bertie came in at half time and he said, Higgins, you've had a nightmare, son. You're getting subbed. He says, you know the problem with you, Higgins? He says, the brains are in your head, not your feet. That was the kind of thing that you could, because if you did end out the ordinary, you get a label on. So that was it. So you're a great bunch of intelligent people here in the room, West End of Glasgow, and you've got the two brainiest guys in Scottish football sitting beside me today. Simon.
Davie, tell us a bit about your book, because that's why we're here, Sliding Tackles and Boardroom Battles. Tell us a wee bit about how it came about.
Well, I wrote my book because it's actually 3 years now. I had an accident. I came out of a business meeting, fell down some stairs in Edinburgh, ruptured an artery into my brain, and had a pint of blood left. And I was lucky, the brilliant people at the NHS and Edinburgh Royal Infirmary saved my life. Basically, it was a vascular surgeon just coming off his shift, and if he hadn't been there, I don't think I'd have made it. And he repaired the artery, and I then started to recover. But they'd left an open wound at my head, and it was really quite difficult to recover from. But I started to say to myself, listen, you come through worse in your football career, so you'll go over this. And I started getting up, started writing some stuff down, and that took me out of my misery, and actually got my focus to do that. And I started writing my book. But there was some strange things happened because of my brain injury, because apparently the neurologist, a woman, great woman, she said to me, there's been a lot of things happen to you that you'll wonder what's happening. She said, so here's my mobile number. If there's anything you're unsure, just phone me. So I woke up one morning, and my dad was from the Isle of Skye, and he used to take me and my brother up to Skye and dump us for 6 weeks. And my grandparents only spoke Gaelic. So if you wanted in, you had to speak Gaelic. So I was fluent in Gaelic when I was 8, 9, 10 years of age, and I hadn't spoken it since. But I woke up one morning and started speaking in Gaelic to my wife, and she said, oh, I better phone that doctor. I don't think she understands Gaelic. So anyway, she says, what's happening is your brain's resetting, and there's things that in your brain that are just there in the background, and they'll come to the fore. And I thought, right, well, that's it. So 36 hours it lasted. I've got an auntie up in Inverness who speaks fluent Gaelic, and her and I were on the phone for about 3 hours, apparently, exchanging things. So I can only speak a few words now, but it was quite an experience. The other thing that happened to me was I thought about my mortality. How did I recover? And guys like Neil Cooper, that used to play with Rangers in Aberdeen, fell downstairs. He didn't survive. A guy that I played with at Dundee, John McPhail, great centre-half that went on to play for Sheffield United, Sunderland. He fell downstairs, and I've been to see him. He's got, brain damage and all that kind of thing. So I was very, very lucky. So I started writing about players I used to play with that are no longer here, managers that are no longer here, and that kind of, as I say, brought me out my depression, because it was a dark place to be. And I started to get better and finished my book, and then someone decided they wanted to publish it, and that's what I did. So it was a great cathartic thing for me, and actually realised that everything happens for a reason, and if you've got positive thinking and think about how you're going to sort things, you can recover from it, and that was a great lesson for me.
Brilliant, Davie. Davie, I can assure you, I was up in the Western Isles with Davie and the other Davie here doing his book launch up there in Lewis, and after 14 pints of lager, he goes back into fluent Gaelic.
Very good, Simon.
Davie, I want to talk to you about getting started about your early days, but let me do the same with your panel here. Tony, would you start us off and tell us how you got involved in professional football in the first place, and who with?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. And Davie told me it's free entry, but the books are not free, okay? And you can't get out of the room unless you pay for the book. I'm a Milton boy, so I'm not a West Ender, but I'm close to a West Ender. So I went to the school up there, and I'd always opportunity during school to go to university, but I was very keen in football as well. And I was afforded that opportunity when I went to Hibs. 4 or 5 clubs after me, but Hibs offered me the chance to study at Edinburgh University if I desired so. And so I signed with them for 2 years on the basis that I would go to university if I wanted to, you know. So that was my introduction to it. I played with the school for Glasgow schools. Most of these guys, you had representative honours at that stage. And but I decided to give professional football a chance. And unfortunately, I had quite a long career. Not distinguished, but a long career. But it was interesting attitude to education, because our coach was Eddie Turnbull, who some of you guys might remember, and he was a real hard man. He served in the Navy in World War II. So we were training one day, and I decided that I was going to give football a full-time go for 2 years and defer university to later in my career. So we're training one day, and Eddie's favourite very often, if you were slacking, he would look at the players and say, "Hey, come on you lads, you're lucky to be involved in professional football. If you weren't doing that, you'd be down the fucking mines." And I said, "Hold on a minute, boss. I'd be second year at Edinburgh University studying engineering." So it was always that. It was exceptional in those days, David, that somebody was involved, and Gordon, I know, was involved in university as well. It was unusual for that to be the case, but that got me into football. And unfortunately, I was quite lucky at that time, because the Hibernian side of the early 70s was a great team to play in, and also it was much admired. So I had a great introduction to football that way, Simon.
Brilliant, thanks very much. And I think we've got our headline for today: Milton boy goes to university. I think we've done it.
Well, there's one that I'll bring it up now, that when I was at FIFPro, the Global Players Union, I worked on a corruption project for 4 or 5 years with FIFA. Now that was an eye-opener. But anyway, I was invited to Lyon, to the headquarters of Interpol, to explain to them about corruption in football and how it impacted the players, you know. So I go along to the headquarters in Lyon. I go through the big security gate. I'm being searched by everybody. And I said to them, "I must be the first boy from Milton that's been invited to the headquarters in Lyon, because normally they come in here with handcuffs on."
Gordon, your early days getting started?
Yeah, well, I was very keen. My grandfather had been a player, played for Kilmarnock, and he won 2 Scottish Cups as a player. Second time he was captain, but I never ever met him. He was dead before I was born, but it was like a motivation for me that I wanted to be a player right from an early age. And I did used to practice a lot. I was determined I was going to make it. At 14 years of age, I had the chance to sign for Rangers, Celtic and Kilmarnock. My dad said, "You're going to Kilmarnock." I said, "Because you're a fan." He goes, "No, you've got a bit more of a chance there. And if you make it, the big clubs will come back for you." It was good advice at the time. So I signed for Kilmarnock, and at 16, I became a professional. But my mum was a big influence in my household, and she was determined I was going to do my hires. I wasn't leaving school. So she made me stay at school. At 17, I was in the Kilmarnock first team. And a Saturday, I'd be playing against Rangers, Celtic, Aberdeen, Hearts. And a Monday, I was in a classroom, right? I was doing my hires, right? That was the truth. A lot of people couldn't believe that I was a schoolboy. But I have to tell you this quick story. The SFA got in touch with me and said, "You got a passport, Gordon?" I was like, "No." And they said, "You've just been chosen to play for the professional youth team against France. You need to get a passport." So they took me up to Glasgow, Park Gardens, sat down with them. They filled in the form and about it. And the guy says to me, "Are you full-time at Kilmarnock, Gordon?" I says, "No, I'm still doing my hires at school." And I went, "Okay." 2 weeks later, I got my passport to go to France. And in the passport in those days was occupation. My occupation, my passport said schoolboy. A 10-year passport, by the way. I was married with 2 kids, still travelling with that. That's just I learned about the SFA at that point, right? So at 18, I've got a summer job, and I'm actually doing this little summer job for a Viber plant company, plant hire. And I went home, I was talking with Kilmarnock about going full time. My mum says, "Here's your dinner ready, and here's your acceptance." I says, "My acceptance for what?" "Your degree." I says, "I never applied, Mum." She says, "No, I did." That was me doing a degree then, right? So that's how it started for me. And I was working, and the funniest thing was I was finished my degree, and I got a job as a marketing development manager for a company in Glasgow called Edward McNeil Limited. Now, the thing about it was that there'd been a lot of talk over the years about transfers, teams interested in me, nothing had ever happened. And I went to see I got the job. I started on the Monday, and the Thursday night was training session. I went to see the manager, Willie Fernie. I said, "Look," I said, "there's been a lot of talk about me being transferred. My ambition was to play at a high level, play full time. It's not happened. I'm going to be concentrating now on my job." that's going to take my priority. That was a Thursday night. Saturday was the first game of the season. Monday, I'm in the office, my second week in the office. Phone rings in the morning. Willie Fernie, command manager. Where are you? I said, well, you've rung me, you know where I am. He said, no, I got your number for the secretary. I said, I'm in my office. He goes, you in Glasgow? I went, yeah. He said, you $5? I said, no, why? Just sold you to Rangers. See you there in an hour. That was me signed for Rangers at that time. And I actually went and told my bosses I've got to nip out and do something just along the road. I went along to Ibrox, signed, and Jock Wallace shook my hand and said to me, welcome to Club Gordon, that's taken a while. So what do you mean? He goes, I've been trying to sign you for the last 4 years, do you know no? I was like, no. He said, I've been in twice a year with an offer for Kilmarnock, and no, they had never told me. And that was me. So what I did say to him was, what's the programme here? He says, we train every morning. I says, what do we do in the afternoon? He says, generally you're free. I says, I've got a job just down the road. Can I keep working? And he goes, if it doesn't interfere with football, yes. The reason I did that was because I had a car with my job. You see, they gave me a car, back in the belt. So I went back to see my bosses. I said, couple of things. The reason I had to nip out was I've just signed for Rangers. They're like, you're kidding, so you're leaving us? I went, that's the second thing I'm going to tell you. I'm not leaving you. I need to negotiate now a part-time wage because I'll be working every afternoon for you. And that's what happened. And that's how my career started. I got my degree at that point, and I always did thank my mum in later years. At the time, I was annoyed having to do it when I was just considering I just wanted to be a footballer. But in later years, I did say, thanks, Mum. You did me a big favour.
Mr. McKinnon.
Well, before I say that, I'd just like to talk about my book, right? Slide Tackles and Boardroom Battles. I got our good friend Ali McCoy's to do a wee video, and he called it 100 Slide Tackles for some reason. But slide tackles, those of you that maybe saw it, I loved a slide tackle because it's an art. It's a real art, honestly, and it's now disappeared. Nobody slides tackles because VAR, it looks bad sometimes because what you have to do is win the ball and sometimes the player goes up in the air. So that was it. And also the boardroom battles. I had a lot of boardroom battles when I was chief executive of some clubs. But the slide tackle, it's the greatest thing in the world. And my favourite slide tackle ever was at Rugby Park, Kilmarnock, because in those days, the pitch was just immaculate. Yeah. Unbelievable. What a surface it was. And we arrived, Rangers, we were playing Kilmarnock over 3 games. We played them in the League Cup. I think it was on the Wednesday. We beat them 6-0. We played them in the league on Saturday, beat them 6-0. And we played them the following Wednesday and beat them 6-0. So we beat them 18-0 over 3 games. And it was the last game. There was a guy called Ian Bryson, tricky winger. And he was perfect because what he used to do is hit the ball too far in front of him. And that's when you get your notion you go in and do a slide tackle. And I thought, right. So anyway, so I see him, he's played it a couple of times and I think, right, I'm going to time this. So I time it and I slip right across the grass, right? And I win the ball. He goes up in the air, but I keep slipping and sliding because of the surface. There's a drizzle. And I go over the touch line, which was sawdust in those days. So sawdust all over my hair and all that kind of thing. Linesman goes up in the air, right across the track. A policeman goes up in the air. And then a guy selling Wrigley's spearmint chewing gum goes up in the air and end up in the old terracing. And I'm in there and I'm in a heap amongst Kilmarnock supporters. And the old terrace and the holes in the roof and all that. And just as I stood up, a glint of sunlight comes through. I shake my head and the sawdust comes and somebody from the back shouts, "Oh fuck, he split his head open." So that's why it was called slide tackles. But like, I actually went to Arsenal when I was 16. I'd been playing a team called Glasgow United, and it was a great team with some great players in it. And scouts used to come to every game. It was at Tory Glen, where the indoor place is now, and it was great. So I went and trialled to a lot of teams: Leeds, Chelsea, Ipswich, Man United, Arsenal, Tottenham, and my cousin at the time, second cousin, the late Ronnie McKinnon, that played with Rangers. My dad took me to Ibrox and we met him after the game, and he said to me, he says, "You a player yourself?" I said, "Oh, I've got a few clubs that might be signing for," and I rhymed them off, and he said, "I know Frank McClintock very well." He said, "Sign for Arsenal and I'll phone him and tell him that you're coming down, they'll look after you. So I said, right, so Arsenal it was, right. And in those days, there was not the kind of support that you get now for young players. I got an address in North London and a ticket through the post from Glasgow to Euston, and told I have to go to Bounds Green. So I'm looking and all that. So in those days, I think some Gordon mentioned about once that you had a case, huge case, but they didn't have wheels cases. So you had to carry it about. So I arrived at Euston, managed to find my way on the Piccadilly line to Bounds Green, and then started walking to this address. I always remember it, Boundary Road in Bounds Green. Arrived, and that was me settled in. And I was there, and some great players in the youth team at that time, Frank Stapleton, David O'Leary, Graham Ricks, Liam Brady, loads of great players that went on to play in great careers. And but I also had two players that looked after me. And one of the things that I'm sure the guys will say is that if you've got guys in your camp, experienced players that educate you in the game, it makes it a lot easier. And I was flitting between right back and centre midfield. Centre midfield was a guy loved by Scottish fans, wee Alan Ball. Great wee guy. And at right back was Pat Rice, Irish international. And I remember Pat saying to me after training one day, he says, right, come on to Highbury. I'm going to show you how to play as a right back. I thought, this is wonderful. So I go in and he says, who's your favourite player? I says, George Best. Right, he says, well, Best, he plays with me in Northern Ireland, he says, and to be honest, he never gets a kick of the ball when I'm playing against him. He said, how would you play him? I says, well, you get close. He went, no. He says, Best is a type, he'll come up to you with the ball, it's static, and then he'll put you off balance, and he's away using his pace. He said, so when he comes up to you, keep your eye on the ball and get a tackle in. He says, so keep your eye on the ball will no move. So I thought, well, that's great. So I practiced, and I played against George Best, and I had a good game against him. They said to me, is Pat Rice been speaking to you? I said, aye, as a matter of fact, he is. So that was it. And then wee Bolly said to me, a great lesson, he says, if you're playing centre midfield or midfield, he said, what happens is, he says, a thing called perpetual motion. He said, from the first whistle, you need to run, you need to move about, you have to get a tackle in, a header, bring yourself to attention to the crowd. He says, because the crowd are there, there's scouts there, there's managers, and then in the last 20 minutes, do the exact same. Go in and win a few tackles, play a few balls in, and continue to run. He says, it'll serve you well through your career. I actually got me 2 moves through my career, so it worked. And I was at Arsenal. I was there 4 years and had a 2-year contract, and decided to get transferred to Dundee, which wasn't at the time the smartest thing. And in writing my book, I was wondering, I have to put this to bed because I carried it about all my life in football. Why did that, with a 2-year contract, sign for Dundee? And actually, the reason was, and I'll quickly go through this, is the fact is, when I signed for Dundee, Tommy Gemmell, the great fullback, who was the best penalty kick taker in the world, I wanted to know his secret. So I remember after training one day, once I signed for Dundee, I said, Tam, what's your secret? I grab a couple of balls and we'll take a few penalties. And I said, right. He says, you go in goals. I said, right. So I'm in goals. And he says, what a day is, he said, I put the ball in the spot, I run up as fast as I can. He says, I get my head over it and I hit it as hard as I can. He says, and if I've not got a clue where it's going, the goalkeeper's got no chance. And I thought, right, that's a great lesson. So balls were flying in the top corner. What a penalty kick taker is like. You just didn't have a clue where they were going. 14 years later, I'm the captain of Kilmarnock, and it comes to the last game of the season against Cowdenbeath, and it's 1 each with 9 minutes to go, and we get a penalty. We have to win to get promoted. The Kilmarnock at that time were in flats on their backside, and this was a chance to go up the league. So we had to win to get promoted. So apparently I'm the captain, I need to take responsibility. So I'm walking past my great friend Tommy Burns, who's, as you know, sadly missed, but was very religious. So he's praying as I'm passing him, and he says, you better score with this. I said, all right, confidence. He said, aye. He says, I'm talking to the big man now, he said, and he says he'll even support Rangers players, so you're okay, Davie, you'll score. I said, that's very kind of Tommy. So I got up, placed the ball in the spot, and as soon as I placed it in the spot, Tommy Gemmell's voice came into my head, and I hit it as hard as I can, scored, and Kilmarnock get promoted. So
a crucial moment here, requiring a cool head. Billy Lamont on the line. It looks as though Davie MacKinnon will take the penalty. McKinnon against Lamont. 2-1 to Kilmarnock. 9 minutes of the match left. That should settle it. Penalty entrusted to one of the most experienced campaigners in the field, Davie MacKinnon, thundering it hard, straight at the keeper.
it's a bit tenuous, but in my book, I put a lot of ghosts to rest, and sometimes you need that. You need to know why you do things. So that was it. So Arsenal was a great education.
Brilliant. Davie, you mentioned names, just rename dropping in there. So I'm going to get everybody to do a wee bit of name dropping. George Best, you played along with Best, Tony. Tell us some of your favourite players or players you played against.
Well, George Best, obviously, I played with him, and occasionally I would drink with him. So, I could match him in drinking right enough, but certainly not in playing. But well, he was an incredible character. When he came to Hibs, he was at the end of his career, but he played well in the games. When we're playing Rangers or Celtic or Hibs or Aberdeen with a full capacity crowd of 40,000, you could see his eyes dancing, and he was up for it big time. And he used to display some wonderful talent. He'd lost his pace by then, but George was probably the first sort of superstar in global football. I remember I played in 6 European campaigns when I was at Hibs in the 70s, and we played against some of the great sides, Liverpool side of the Juventus sides, the whole lot. But when Best joined us, we had camera crews from all over the world who came to interview him, you know, that come from South America, from Eastern Europe, from Africa. Every few days somebody would arrive because they thought maybe he was getting his career back in situ again, you know, but an incredible talent. But of course, that time he had a problem with alcohol, Simon, you know, and he had this implant. It was a Swedish drug that implanted in his stomach. So if he touched any alcohol, he would immediately collapse, you know. So all the guys were trying to find ways of putting a wee bit of whiskey in his water and all that sort of stuff, you know, convincing him it was iron brew. But he had a completely different lifestyle from us. I remember I used to say in the Monday morning to him, how did the weekend go, George? He said, I was at a party with Britt Eklund and Michael Caine and Rod Stewart, the whole lot. And I'd say to Jackie McNamara, how about you, Jackie? I was at East House Masonic. Lager's 10 pence less in there than it is in the pubs, you know, so a completely different lifestyle. But he was actually a very nice guy. He was a very nice guy, you know. But he was the first player I ever saw who had the smellies, you know, the wee carry bag within it, and have all these aftershaves and body balms, all that sort of stuff, you know. But he was an incredibly nice guy as well, you know. And he's probably, I mean, I would argue he's probably the best British player of all time, certainly in my memory. He had everything. He could tackle, he could head the ball, he had pace, he could score goals. But I remember we were down to play Rangers at Ibrox in a league game. And normally he was up for that, but on the Wednesday, we went, Tuesday it was, after training, we went for a pint shandy. Of course, George took a pint and we never saw him again. And on the Friday night, I was back, although I lived in Edinburgh, when we played against the Old Firm, I stayed at my mother's house in Ashgill Road in Lamb Hill, you know. And the phone goes about 10:30 at night, and it's George Best. My mother says, Anthony! I'm up the stair. That's George Best, the phone for you. You know? So I'm going away down the stair. And, George, what's fucking going on? He said, are you going to play tomorrow? I said, I don't know. I'm fucking pissed out my maze. I said, we're playing Rangers. He said, I know that. I said, I'll decide tomorrow. He said, do you want to come to a party? I said, George, it's 9:30. A Friday night, we're playing Rangers tomorrow at 3 o'clock. You want me to come to a party? He said, no way. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. So he put the put the phone down. And I'm at the North British Hotel for the pre-match meal about 12 o'clock. And I can't wait to tell the rest of the players that George Best phoned me 9:30 at night, invite me through to a party in Edinburgh. And the first hand goes up, fucking phoned me at 7:15. You know? I think he'd phoned every other player in the squad that time, but he was incredible talent. The one, I played against Kevin Keegan, all these guys, but the one I always remember, maybe the older guys might remember, a guy called Jose Altafino, who was Argentinian, and he held the record for the most goals scored in the European Cup prior to the new format. And we played against him at Juventus, and he was an incredible player. He'd been in his 30s then, and this was back in 74, I think it was. But then he used to get £1,000 for every goal he scored, right? And £1,500 for every winning goal he scored. Well, you can imagine, they beat us 8-3 in aggregate, and he scored 6 goals. So he earned in 2 games what I used to earn in about 3 years, you know. But he was probably the most talented player I remember. But he was towards the end of his career, and he was an Argentinian icon in those days.
Thanks, Tony. Gordon,
Yeah.
same thing, but remember we've got a mutual friend that you could tell us a wee story about as well.
A non-football friend.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
What I was going to say, one of the things I meant to say when I was speaking last time was I have read Dave's book, and it's a brilliant read. Honestly, I must say that right away. One of the best books I've read, and I've read a lot of sports books, and a lot of them have got good stories in it. But Dave's book, the whole of his book, is very worth reading, and that's why I recommend it. I meant to say that earlier on. As George Best, I agree with you, was the best British player I think there's ever been. And I remember one time he said he'd given up the drink and the women. It was the worst 20 minutes of his life. But that's how I summed them up. But no, the best player I played against was actually, what happened was, we were playing against Valencia in the European Cup when I was at Rangers, and I got a tap on the shoulder at the end of the game after 90 minutes, and I turned round and he wanted my shirt. Mario Kempes, the famous Argentinian player, right? The year before, he'd won the World Cup for Argentina, and I never knew at that time, but even to this day, he's the only player who's ever been top scorer, won the World Cup, and been voted the best player. He wanted my shirt. I couldn't believe it. We were not allowed to swap shirts, right? If I'd swapped shirts with him, I'd have been sent back down to the dressing room to get my shirt back. God's honest truth. For the return game in Glasgow, I went to Grieve Sports and bought a Rangers top. I bought a 1 and a 0, I got it sewn on, I had it under my seat. I'm going to wear this tonight. John Gregg, the manager, came in and named the team, and I was number 8. Somebody bloody told them what I was up to, right? Because I went, boss, he said 8, and he went, aye. I went, I'm 10 every game. He goes, well, you're 8 tonight. He says, I'm superstitious. And he goes, team lines are in, you're too late. Somebody bloody told him that. And I actually gave the shirt to charity and said, this is the shirt I nearly swapped with Mario Kempes. But so he was the best. The best I played with was Davie Cooper. Brilliant player to play alongside, fantastic ability and all that. And it was a pleasure to play with him. But the man he's talking about is somebody I became friends with. Met him initially when I was at Rangers, then met him again when I was down south because he lived quite near me in Brighton, and it was Paul McCartney. Right, I got friends with Paul McCartney, and got invited along to his house one day, and I was sitting my wife was through in the kitchen with Linda, just chatting, and I just sat with Paul for hours chatting away. He was great, a great guy to talk to, and even at that time, I'll never believe it. He said he was recording in London, and I said to him, "Oh, have you got security, Paul?" He goes, "No." I said, just drive up to London. He goes, no, I go on the train. I went, you go on the train to Victoria Station? He went, yeah. I go, you don't get any hassle. He says, I see people looking at me, Gordon, and then they think, no, it can't be him, right? He looks like Paul McCartney, but I couldn't believe it. But the main part of the story was that what happened was he said to me during the chat, he goes, do you play guitar, Gordon? I was like, yeah, I do. And he goes, oh, do you do any of my stuff? I said, oh, aye. I said, of course. What ones do you do? And I named a few songs. One of them was a song, Blackbird. Yeah, you know Blackbird? He suddenly goes, he said, you can play that. He says, people are always asking me. I says, I couldn't work it out, Paul. I says, I had to get a friend of mine who's a guitarist. He took weeks and weeks to work it out, and then he showed me. He suddenly got up out of his seat. I didn't know where he was going. He went out of the room, came back in with his guitar, sat down beside me and sang Blackbird to me while I was sitting beside him. It's one of those moments in your life you never forget. And there was no cameras, no phones in those days to film it. But it was quite funny. See, when he finished, this is true, when he finished, he goes, is that how you play it, Gordon? I was like, a wee bit better than that, Paul. That was actually okay though. He did laugh. So I got to see him. I met him again about 5 years ago, when I just met somebody who was doing his security. And they said, "Oh, I'm doing the security for Paul McCartney's tour." I said, "Oh, I used to know Paul. His friends with him, not spoken to him for years." He said, "All right." He says, "Give me your email address." So about a week later, he emailed me saying, "Paul is leaving you 2 tickets for his show at the Hydro." And a week before the show, I got another email saying, "Paul wants to meet you before the show." So I went to meet him, and I've got the film. It's on my camera, my phone. If you ever want to see it, me and him talking. Because what I did say to him was, I said, "The last time we were together, Paul, you sang to me." I says, "I'm going to sing to you this time. There's only 15 more days I can sing this song." And he went, "When I'm 64. He knew what song it was. So I'm on the film singing it to him. But that was a great thing to. I was lucky. Throughout my career, I've been very lucky in respect to people I've met. Could quickly mention, I got chosen for the FIFA football committee when I was at the SFA. And I got there late in the day, and so I apologised for being late. I went and sat in the front row, and Franz Beckenbauer was the chairman. He was at the top of the table, and I apologised to him. And after an hour, it was a tea break, a coffee break. I went out and got my coffee, sat down. Franz Beckenbauer came and sat beside me. Who sat across from me? Pelé. Next to Pelé, Eusebio, Bobby Charlton, Michel Platini, Dino Zoff. I was thinking, if there's a team getting picked here, I wouldn't get in it. I couldn't believe it. Honestly, all my heroes of my football life were at that table sitting, chatting, and I got to know them over time. So I've been very fortunate in that respect.
By the way, it's Sir Paul McCartney to you guys. Macca to you and Macca to me.
I'll just quickly tell you about the best player I think I've played against, Johan Cruyff. Those of you remember him. I was at Arsenal, and in those days, they'd one substitute, right? So I was 13th man quite a lot, but it was George Armstrong's testimonial at Highbury, full house, and I was one of the subs. I think there's about 5 subs, and 20 minutes to go, the manager calls me over and said, "I'm taking off Pat Rice, you're going in at right back." He said, "I want you marked there, number 14. And I looked through the gloom and the lights, and there was Johan Cruyff. And I went up to him, so I ran on as the subs do. And I ran on, there was about 20 minutes to go, and I said to him, I said, "You're Johan Cruyff." He went, "Aye, who are you?" I says, "I'm Davie MacKinnon." He says, "Where are you from?" "Yeah, "Oh, Glasgow." He said, "Oh, Glasgow, I know Glasgow very well." He said, "Very good." He said, "I wish you all the best, young man," right? So I'm marking him, and the big thing about marking somebody, touch tight, basically you did that with your arm, so you didn't get turned as a fullback. So it was that, and I thought, well, I'm playing him well. I need to just quickly go up and show you this. But so what happened was,
Careful now.
the left fullback played the ball in quite fast to him, and I'm marking him touch tight. The next thing he goes like that and stubs it, and the ball goes over his head and over my head, and he's in goal and scores. And I'm thinking, oh no, that's it. That's my debut. I'm screwed. So anyway, he comes up to me and he says, young man," puts his arm on my shoulders. He said, "Glasgow?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I have some guilders in my pocket in the dressing room." I said, "Oh." He said, "Yes." He says, "I'm going to give it for your taxi fare back to Glasgow." I thought, "Oh, very good." But to be fair, he came into the dressing room and gave me his jersey after the game, so that was a bonus. So Johan Cruyff, gentleman, and what a player. And like Gordon, the best player he played with was Davy Cooper. Incredible.
Yeah. Keep the mic just now, Davey, because you told us a wee story earlier on about your singing debut. And we're talking celebrities here, and you met one of the kings of country music, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I just stopped playing football, and guy I loved, wanted to see him live, Kenny Rogers, and he was on at the concert hall in Glasgow. So I go along, get tickets, go along into the foyer, and there's a guy you probably remember, Russell Ledbetter, that was at the Evening Times.
Yeah.
So he's standing, and there's a film crew. And he said to me, he says, "Oh, Davey, how you doing?" I said, "No bad." He says, "You're Kenny Rogers, man." I said, "Oh, absolutely." He says, "Do you know any songs?" I said, "As a matter of fact, I do." He says, "Well, there's a camera crew here. What Kenny wants is he films some of his audience singing, and he plays it in the dressing room. It gives him a wee bit of a laugh and a spurt and all that kind of thing." So anyway, I sing "Coward of the County," right? And they filmed it. And so we get into the auditorium, and suddenly the lights come up, and this guy comes on the stage and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry, but Kenny's got a sore throat and he's not going to make it tonight." And there's booze and everything, and there's a big screen. "But we've got a fill-in for him. You've painted up," it was Ruby singing, "You've painted up your lips and rolled them cold." So it's me up on the big screen. And then Kenny Rogers comes on, to much everybody's relief. And he said, "That guy," he said, "he's a soccer player, get him up here." So at the end of the day, he's singing his song, and I'm at the back doing backing vocals, which was just incredible. So next front page of the Evening Times is ex-Rangers player makes his debut on the concert hall stage. So that was good. Absolutely brilliant. No chance.
Go on.
Well, he's very complimentary about singing, so but not today, I'm afraid. So thanks, Chris. Gordon's a singer.
Guys,
Anyway,
maybe miss Gordon out of this one, but you'll probably have some stories. There's a few Jags fans in here, I'm sure, today, is there? The others. That's quite a good crowd, actually. Some stories about Thistle, the Bertie Auld days, the crazy gang, as you christened them to me, David.
Bertie was, of course, a Mary Hill man. And he was unique, and Davie will remember that he used to wear his European Cup medal around his neck, Bertie, you know. And occasionally he would go for it to reveal it. And one of his great adversaries in Scottish football was Alex Ferguson. They had a real contentious relationship when they're both players. And at that time, Dave will remember, Partick Thistle had a really good record against Aberdeen. We invariably beat them at Pittodrie or take points off them at Firhill, etc., you know. So when they came out, well, I remember we were playing Aberdeen one day, it was the height of the great side with McLeish and Strachan, the whole lot, Willie Miller. And wee Bertie's on the bench, you know, coming out. And Fergie, you know, Fergie's one of these coaches who was always out shouting, bawling, in the whole lot, you know. And wee Bertie leaned in going, "You sick, you bucket arse." You know, "If you get one of these, you get one of these." Out popped the European Cup medal, because Bertie always had that on him, you know. But the great thing was, I mean, I saw in Davie's book about the references, Big Alan Ruff. And Alan Ruff, Big Ruffy had a strange relationship with Bertie, you know. Bertie'd shout and curse at him, but Big Ruffy was unflappable, you know, just wouldn't bother, you know. And I remember that I was a captain for a spell until I got injured. He used to rotate the captaincy, David, remember, he'd give it to you for a few games until you lost. So we went through about 14 captains, actually. But I remember we were at Firhill, and wee Gordon Strachan Zambo's over to take a corner. And I'm the captain, I'm saying, "Ruffy, remember now, McLeish and Miller and Rugby are up. Come and take the ball." And Ruffy said to me, "Big man, I know you're just here, but I don't come for cross balls." "No, but they've got Big Rugby and McLeish are 6'5". "I don't come for cross balls, you know." And of course that I said to him, "Ruffy, you need to try and dominate your box." Anyway, Strachan takes the corner, and Big Ruffy comes off his line for the first time ever. And the ball just floats over his head. And Big Ruffy shouts, "It's no mine!" but Bertie was like that. I remember we were training one night, I remember the night, David, and he's doing an exercise from Largs. And of course, wee Bertie didn't like the Largs regime, you know, he was completely against all that, you know. And a wee boy training, I forget his name, but he was from Bearsden, a very polite boy, you know. And he's in the training. And he'd been one of the young professionals at Largs who was used as a sort of, as a worker during the time for the big coaches. So they brought these young guys in and they developed all the strategies and tactics, the whole lot. And so we're doing this exercise, a shooting and finishing exercise, you know. And wee Bertie's saying, "Right, son." So the boy went down, they kept passing the ball to the wrong man. And Bertie's going, "For fuck's sake, son, I've told you 5 times. And he said, "I'm sorry, boss, but that's not the way Mr. Roxburgh does it." fucking Boxborough. Because if Bertie was against you, he'd mispronounce your name. Boxborough. If you get one of these, son. Off the European Cup medal. So that was always great defensive tactics. But they were a great bunch. But I came just towards the end of that crazy gang. But Davey's got some great stories about some of the guys who played with him as well.
That was Inverclyde, Tony, is that what you're talking about?
I was transferred from Dundee to Partick Thistle, and there's a great photograph in the book of Tommy Gemmell one side and Bertie Auld the other side, and me in the middle signing, and it was great. And I signed, and actually I trebled my wages, but I didn't know that they were only part time. So I said to Bertie, I said, right, I'll see you. I think I signed the Wednesday. I says, I'll see you at the ground tomorrow morning. He says, there'll be nobody there, son. I said, what do you mean? He says, they're part-time, you train at night. So I said, right. So the first night I arrived, he said, right, what we're doing is we're going on a cross-country run. And I thought, right, this is Mary Hill. Where do you go on a cross-country run? And he says, right, we'll go up to Postle Park, Saracen, Balmore Road, and then back down. He says, and what I want you to do is, he says, you'll run with Ruffy. He said, because I want you to push him. And I said, right, okay. So anyway, so he's outside Firhill, he's got the stopwatch. Right, go! And we run up Firhill Road into Panmure Street. And I'm looking, and there's a taxi with its engine running. And Big Ruffy says to me, running's no for goalkeepers, Davey. He said, I'm in the taxi. Do you want to come in with me? So I'm thinking, I've just signed. There's no way I'm going to do it. I says, no, I'll keep running. He says, right. He says, what I'll do is, he says, I'll get you to the end of Balmore Road and we'll run in together. So I'm thinking, right. So I'm running through Postle Park. Guys are throwing bricks at me and all that kind of thing. Saracen, same thing. Then I get to the end of Balmore Road and I see a taxi. That taxi about 250, 300 yards in front of me, and Ruffy puts his head out, and he gets out, and the big B starts running. And I'm like, he's 300 yards in front of me, so I managed to clock back as we go into Firhill Street, right down, and he beats me by 50 yards, and he dips. And when he goes over the line, and wee Bertie grabs me by the throat, he says, I thought you could run, son. He says, that's how I signed you. He said, and Big Ruffy's outrun you. And Big Ruffy says, you're not Dundee now, Davey. I'm going in for a bath. And wee Bertie says, right, Davey, 12 laps in the track. Big Tony McKinnon, the physiotherapist, take him round the track. And I thought to myself, what a club this is. And just talking about Aberdeen, my first game was, I played against Dundee United, and then our next game was away at Aberdeen up at Pittodrie. And so bus journey, you get the bus, and we were going to Stonehaven for a pre-match meal. Right, so anyway, I'm sitting in the bus and I look, and Ruffy comes on with a white suit. He'd been at Slater's and got a white suit, right? So he goes on, and Bobby Houston comes on. Bobby Houston's got a black leather suit, and he sits beside Ruffy. So they got up to Stonehaven, and I couldn't help but notice, but Ruffy's got a big black stripe down his white suit. And he goes, the drive, this is a joke, this bus, look at it, it's terrible and all. So we're going for the pre-match meal, and wee Ali Love, who was great there, he was a character. He said, hey, Ruffy, do you know how your black leather, or your white suit get all black? He says, Badger, that was Bobby Houston's name. He says, Badger, tell him. So Bobby Houston says, Ruffy says, I apologise, he says, but he says, I was looking at my black leather suit for today, he says, and Margaret, my wife, thought it was looking a bit shabby, so she gave it a wee bit of a boot polish. And I'm sorry, big man. So, that's a joke. Anyway, so next thing, Bertie says, right, go out for a walk to Stonehaven. Right, and Brian Whittaker, who was just incredible, sad he's no longer with us, but Brian was a brilliant guy, and he was always trying to do one in Big Ruffy. So Ruffy had a bracelet, and for some reason he'd taken it off, and Brian had nabbed it. So we're going along Stonehaven, the wall there, and there's the beach, and the water's coming in and coming out, coming out, and Brian Whittaker had gone on ahead, and he said to Ruffy, he said, see, he says, have you lost your bracelet? He went, aye, I have. He says, there it is in the sand. He says, I'll bet you a tenner, Ruffy, you can't dive in to the sand, get the bracelet, and get back up without getting wet. I can do that, no bother. So next thing, the water's going in and out, and it goes out, and Ruffy jumps in, and Brian had dug a hole, and he goes right into the hole, right up to his thighs. So I'm just signed for this club, and I'm looking at Scotland's international goalkeeper. White curly perm, white suit, black stripe down it, and mud all over him. So we got back on the bus, and Bertie sees Ruffy, and he says, Tony McKinnon was the physio and the kit man. Tony, look at him. Get him black tracky bottoms, and the black tracky bottoms with yellow and red stripes down them. So Ruffy took off his trousers and put on the black tracky bottoms, so he's got the white jacket on, which has still got a stripe down it, the black joggies, and we arrive at Pittodrie, and I go off the bus first, and because I've signed for Thistle, the press are about saying, how's your first couple of weeks been at Partick Thistle? So they're talking to me, and then suddenly they go like that, and photographers arrive taking photographs of Big Ruffy coming off the bus. You know what a state? And I thought, goodness sake, what have I signed for this club for? He went out and was absolutely magnificent, and we beat Aberdeen 2-1 up at Pittodrie. And I think at Thistle we were, really a great team. Great spirit amongst them, and we ended up third and fourth in the league every year, didn't we? And that was great. That was great times at Thistle. Used to beat Rangers and Celtic regularly, and we were up there as a real Glasgow team and did really well.
Brilliant. Gordon, we had to miss you out there because it was the Jags we were talking about, but it was remiss of me not to ask you about two things. One is how you moved from Rangers, because I think that's a fascinating story about your move, and the club you went to, obviously. And that goal you scored in the cup final.
Well, what happened was I actually, John Gregg, the season just finished, I just signed a 5-year contract for Rangers. And I was 1 month into it when John Gregg phoned me up. He said, you at home? I went, yeah. He goes, because my son had just been born at that time, he was just a month old. He says, could you go down to Brighton and speak to Alan Mullery, the manager, he's a pal of mine. He's been trying to sign you, but I don't want to sell you. Could you go and speak to him anyway? And I went, okay. So I go, but I never thought, but Big Davie Provan, who was a Rangers player, ex-Rangers player, and coach, came with me. And we went down, we sat with Alan Mullery, and it was amazing because Alan Mullery thought I was negotiating, and I wasn't. I was just saying no. And the wages went up to 3 times my Rangers wages, and £50,000 to sign. And I'm going, no. And he goes, look, Gordon, go and have some lunch. We'll speak after lunch then. I was like, okay. So I go with Davie Provan for lunch. We sit down, and he goes, that's some money, Gordon. I went, I know, that's unbelievable. He goes, you don't think they're taking it? I went, I'm not taking it. He goes, all right, I might as well tell you, the deal's done. I went, what do you mean the deal's done? He says, we've agreed it. So I went, that's not what Greggy told me. So I phoned Ibrox. John Gregg comes on the phone. The first thing he says, have you signed? I go, no, I'm not signing. He goes, yeah. I go, I'm not signing for Brighton. He goes, yeah. If you don't sign, I'll make your life hell. He says, you'll never play in the first team again. You'll never train with the first team. You'll be playing the reserves. And I said, I can't believe this. I said, how long's your contract? And he went, 3 years. I said, well, I've got 5. I'll maybe see you at the door. And he goes, you want 3 years of hell before that happens? That's what he said to me. I couldn't believe it. So I went back to Alan Mullery and I said, I've had a thought about it. I'll sign. So I signed for Brighton. I got home that day. My wife's like, how's your day? I went, you better sit down. We're going to live in Brighton. I couldn't believe it. But it was, I met John Gregg about a year after that, the first time I met him. And I have to say that I did say to him 2 things. I said, what you did to me was a disgrace, but thanks. I'm enjoying it down there. I really did. It was a lovely place. And it's a true story. But I took up 3 things in Brighton I'd never done before. Golf, gambling and drinking. I was teetotal when I went down there, but the drinking culture was unbelievable. The players were out all the time, beviing, and I was the odd man out. First night out with the boys, like, what are you drinking? I went, I'll have a Coke. They went, no, we're having a drink. I went, yeah, Coca-Cola. You don't drink? I went, no. They came back to the bar with all the drinks. He says, where's mine? They said, we don't buy soft drinks. Get your own. That was me own kitty for a few nights out, It was unbelievable. But the cup final one is incredible because what happened was, I did autobiography. I brought my book along here. I'm not selling this. This is my own one. And I did that about 15, 16 years ago. And the guy who was doing it with me, he got in touch with Norman MacDonald. He says, look, have you done your autobiography? I says, no. He goes, I'll do it with you. He says, I'll write you. We'll do an interview and I'll do all the chapters for you. I was like, okay, we'll do it. So he came in, and this is true. The first one he says to me is, we'll need to talk about the cup final. Now, I'm famous for the FA Cup final for my miss, the last minute of extra time against Man United, 2 each draw. And if I'd scored, we'd won the cup. And I missed, and the final whistle went just after the goalkeeper saved it. And the Brighton fanzine was called "And Smith Must Score," because that's what the commentator actually said during the game, right? Now, this guy came out to do my book, and this is true. He went, we'll do the cup final stuff first, Gordon. I was like, okay. He goes, right, how did the game go? I says, well, we were winning 1-0 at half time. And he went, oh, who scored? I went, me. He goes, no, come on, who scored? I went, I did. He goes, oh, you actually scored in that game? I thought, oh, you've obviously done your good research on that one. Yes, we were 1-0 up. I scored. They went, oh, I didn't know. And so what happened was, when he did the book, that's why it's called "And Smith Did Score," right? It was his idea to call it that, you know. But it was, as I say, it's been tough. The Brighton fans are really good with me. I still find it the hardest thing that ever in my football career to get over. I mean, I was fortunate. I won trophies with Rangers and all that sort of thing, and had a great time. And I loved my time down in England. But if I'd scored that day, it would have been special for me. You know, to miss that chance was a bit of a blow. And as I say, at the time I got over it. Since, because psychologically you get over it, you go, well, it's just a game of football and all that. But since then, it's been more of a problem for me. And as I say, I hate the fact when I'm ever down in Brighton, and I always do it every time if I'm doing a talk and all that, I apologise. It was quite funny. I was talking about, I was doing it with the supporters about a year ago. This is true. And I said, what I said to you now, I said, when I signed here for Brighton, I took up 3 things down here. And I said, gambling, drinking and golf. And the guy came up later on, he says, we're all wondering about what you're going to say there, Gordon. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, when you come down here in 1980, this was the gay capital of Britain. I said, well, that's right, I took up 4 things down there.
Is that your other book?
That's my other book. That's my next book.
Davie?
Well, I think, can I just say about Gordon, though, like 440,000, which was a record at that time.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, that must be worth 4 million, something like that now. Incredible. And I watched his game, and I thought it was a difficult chance. A really difficult chance, because the goalkeeper closed you down very quickly.
He died the wrong way.
Aye, I know. So don't beat yourself up about Gordon, to be perfectly honest.
It's a stutter. It's a stutter.
Never.
Davie, Gordon mentioned your book, and I would really be remiss of me not to mention it, because I loved it, especially when you spoke about people, your dad, for example, who told you, if you don't sign for Rangers, you're not getting back in the door again, kind of thing. And the people that we miss from football now that have passed, players and managers. Do you want to say a wee bit about that?
Well, I'll tell you, the situation about getting transferred to Rangers was a strange one, because when I had my kidney removed when I was 24, I was playing at Thistle and feeling really ill, and 5-6 months, and then I'm at the Southern General Hospital, and a young trainee nurse says, I think you might have tuberculosis. The doctor says, right, we'll test for that. And I did. I had tuberculosis, and I had to get my right kidney removed, which wasn't the greatest. And I was in the ward, and it was a private room I get put into, and Saturday night Scott Sport was on. And there used to be a reporter called Andy Melville. You remember Andy? So anyway, so I'm in there on my own, looking at the TV, Scott Sport, and the Thistle game's on, and Andy Melville comes on and says, just before we bring the Partick Thistle game, just to let you know that Partick Thistle captain, it was my turn, Tony, for 10 games, his career's over tonight after the removal of a kidney. So I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I'm on my own, and half an hour later the door bursts open, and it's wee Bertie. He's got a big cigar, and he's been up at his famous Italian restaurant. He used to go with the guy Phil, remember his mate? And like, I could smell the Havana, and smell the brandy, and he said, I heard about that crap, Davie, in the telly. He says, don't you worry about it. He said, you'll come back as my captain. He says, you've still got 5 games to go. He says, and I phoned the chairman, Miller Reid. He says, and you're going to get some sun in your back. He said, so you just get yourself recovered and you'll come back and you'll be playing. So anyway, so fortnight later, I'm discharged from the hospital, go home, and the doorbell goes, and I'm feeling well enough to get up. And the guy said, sunbed for Mr. McKinnon. So he'd organised the sunbed to me. But it made me motivated to go and go over it. But when I came back, Bertie had gone to Hibs as a manager. And Peter Cormack came in, a really nice guy, Peter, but very introvert he was at the time. And he was just, I think he was 34. And he came into the dressing room, which was a bit strange introduction. And he said, I don't know any of your players except Big Ruffy. He said, we'll see how it goes. And there was a great atmosphere in the Thistle dressing room. We'd all play for each other. So that really was a kick. And he got me in. I played against Clyde, Jerry, in the Scottish Cup in January. And I played every game that season after that. And it came at the end of the season and he said to me, your contract's up. And I said, aye. He said, I'm just trying to change the team. He says, I don't want people who've been here for a few years under the previous manager. So I'm going to put in the papers that you can get transferred. I said, all right. I says, how much you look for? He says, oh, if I get 30 grand, I'll be lucky. I said, oh, very good. So it's in the papers. I got a call from Howard Kendall, who had just taken over as the manager of Everton at the time, and call at the house, and he said, I want you to sign. He said, I'm away on holiday, he says, but I'm back in a couple of weeks. He said, so I want you to come down and sign for Everton. And I'm thinking, that's great, because I envisaged myself running out in an Everton jersey at Highbury and laying the ghost to rest. But because it was in the paper, Davy Provan, the assistant manager, turned up. And I bought Derek Johnson's house, and he knew where to come. And he said, can you come up to Ibrox this afternoon? He says, the manager's going to the World Cup. It was in Spain. He said, and he wants you to sign this afternoon. So I'm thinking, that's it. So anyway, so I phoned my dad, and Simon says, I said to him, he says, well, what are you thinking? I says, well, Everton, that sounds a good deal to me. He says, Davey, says, if you sign for Everton, son, you and I are finished. Don't you ever speak to me ever. Put the phone down. So anyway, so I drive up to Ibrox, and Greggy says to me, he said, we want you to sign. I said, right. So he told me about the wages. He said, I saw Howard Kendall's interest, and he says, so what are the wages? And the wages were 3 times what Rangers were off, because everybody was in the same wage then, as you know. And I said, what about signing on for you? I didn't have an agent. We didn't have agents in those days. So I was chancing my arm out. What about signing on for you? 5 grand, I'll give you. Now, Everton were offering 20. And I think I'm starting to add up. I was quite smart myself about figures, and I thought, that's not very good. And he said, right. He said, did you used to come to games? I said, aye. I says, my dad used to bring me to Rangers games. Right, let's go through the trophy room. So he got a few trophies, put them in my hand. We just won the League Cup. What do you think of that? Took me down to the tunnel. He says, see a Rangers Celtic game. See when you're walking it. He says, the hair's in the back of your head. Where did you used to stand? And I said, over there. He took me onto the terracing, it was seats then, and said, look at the view from here. Because imagine playing for Rangers in that blue and white jersey. He said, unbelievable. And I'd already made up my mind because my dad had told me. So I said, right, gives the pen, and I signed. And it was the best move I made, because I think the thing is, like, Everton was great, would have been great. And Greggy also said to me, he says, Howard's a nice guy, he said, but Everton will never do anything, right? They won the league that season, and they won the European Cup. And I'm thinking, so, all right. So at Rangers was great. When I went there, it was brilliant, because you guys, when I got the ball at the back, they always rolled it out, and I looked up. Davy Cooper wanting it short, Bobby Russell wanting it, Robert Pritz, Jim Beck, John McClelland across. They were all comfortable in the ball. Or I could hit it forward to big Derek Johnson, who was supported by John McDonald. And it was easy for me because all I did was get the ball, play into Coop, run forward, get it back for Bobby Russell, get into the final third, cross it in, and Big Derek scored. I had a few slide tackles, and that was me. So it was absolutely brilliant playing for Rangers, and it was the easiest time, easiest part of my career, because when you're playing with good players like that, it's great. But my dad, finally, my dad, he was a foreman engineer in Babcock's in Renfrew, and he was in charge of a thing called the plant, and there was 400 employees in it, and it was this huge big warehouse. So I'd signed, and he goes in, and they're all there, all the 400 people are there, and he walks in, and they all start applauding him. And he's like waving them, that kind of thing. Says Davey, says it was the best day of my life. And I gave that to my dad, so for me that was the best time to give him that opportunity. And but there was a guy standing brushing with his back to him. And he thought, what's this guy getting involved with? So it was a guy called Jimmy. So it kind of died down a wee bit. My dad said to Jimmy, he says, Jimmy, he says, you all right? He says, aye, Willie, he says, your boy signed for Rangers? And he went, aye. He said, I keep it quiet, Willie. He says, but I'm Rangers' only part-time player. He says, I'm off. You see, sometimes I'm off for 3 or 4 days at a time. That's when we're playing in Europe. And I fly out and then come back.
Yeah.
My dad says, all right. So anyway, the young apprentices got to know this. And a fortnight later, they've got the team posters out. And what they've done is they've put posters up on boards. And they're bringing in, and Jimmy's sweeping the floor. And the same 400 there, and they're saying, aye, Jimmy, you play for Rangers? You know I do.
Yeah.
Right, Jimmy, team 40, where are you? Sweeping away, he says, you daft, who do you think took the 40? There's always one, as you know, so.
David, you mentioned tuberculosis. You mentioned at the start about your injury falling down the stairs. Injuries, if one thing comes across from your book, it's about attitude, it's about adversity. How do you guys go over injuries in your career and setbacks like that?
Well, I'll just quickly tell you about mine, but my first injury came, injuries come the most opportune time. When you're playing really well, you get an injury and it knocks you back. So, but it is all about attitude and how you deal with it. I was at Arsenal when I was 17, and my roommate was Frank Stapleton, great footballer, centre forward, who went to play for Man United now. He was a Catholic from Dublin, supported Celtic. I was a Protestant from Glasgow, supported Rangers. But we threw all that nonsense out the way and realised that life was about your relationships with people, and that's the way it should be. And we had a great relationship. And I remember the twos were doing really well in the reserves, playing out our skin. They're playing some good players, but it was great. And the reserves at Arsenal at that time used to be between 5,000 and 10,000. So it was a big atmosphere that you played. And I remember the manager was Bertie Mee, kind of strange kind of man, always wore a suit to train and all that kind of thing. And he called Frank and I in the Monday, and he said to us the immortal words, keep yourself fit, because we're playing Stoke City at Highbury on Saturday. I'm thinking about playing you, and you're playing definitely, because you know. So anyway, I come into training on the Wednesday, and what they used to do was they used to set up first team against reserves. And so I'm playing the first team. And the guy who dropped was Peter Storey. And England International is great. So Peter and I had a tackle, and I ended up with a broken foot. And I remember the physiotherapist at the time called Fred Street, who went to England, a great guy, and he said to me, I says, what do you think? I said, do you think I'll be all right for Saturday? Davey says, you're out for 3 months. I said, right. He said, so we'll put a plaster cast on it. He said, and what we want you to do is just keep your leg up for 3 or 4 weeks and then come in and get your rehab, and you'll be back playing 3 months. So anyway, so I remember in my digs, the couple's going away, their daughter stayed in Devon, so they're away for the weekend. So Frank goes to Highbury. I'm sitting with my leg up, broken foot, and I put on the radio, and it's Arsenal against Stoke from Highbury,
Yeah.
and Frank's making his debut. And I'm thinking to myself, that could have been me. Now, I'm 400 miles away from my family. You're on your own. It's a difficult time, so you need inner strength about how to overcome it. And I did that, and I came back and played. But these are the kind of things that happen to you in football. And one of the things that you have to do is you have to suddenly realise that your inner strength and your mental capacity to recover and get back to where you are is hugely important, because the alternative is to pack it in and no play again and just disappear. So you need that strength. So that was my first time. And then obviously with my kidney, I was also at Rangers, and as I said about my knee, and there's a story about that I can talk about later, but I'll just put you over to Gordon.
No, well, I was very fortunate in my time. The most I ever missed was maybe one game, and I was fit again. So I never really had anything serious. The only thing serious illness I had what was called osteomyelitis, which is a bone marrow infection. I had that when I was at Manchester City. It was the last game of the season. Just before I got it, we won the last game to get promotion to the top league, and I missed the game because I was in hospital. And I was in hospital for 3 weeks with that. Then in bed again at home for about another 3 weeks. I lost about 1.5 stone in that time, just because I wasn't eating, I wasn't hungry. That was the only major thing I had. I recovered from it. The Man City were told, Billy McNeil told me, the manager, he said that the doctors had said he didn't think I was going to recover again from it, but I did. And but by the time I was fit again, there was a young player called Paul Simpson had come into the Man City team, and he was more or less keeping me out on a week-to-week basis, and I moved on from there. That's when I left, and I went to Oldham on loan, and then I went to Austria and then Switzerland after that. But I was fit, because when I went to Austria, the training schedule in Austria and Switzerland as well, actually, was much, much tougher than in the UK. They were much more scientific in those days abroad than they were in Britain. We used to have doctors used to measure us, check us out. When you did these running sessions, you used to take blood from your ear, and what they do from that is they work out the lactic acid, and that tells you your recovery rate and all that. And then we're put into groups according to fitness, and you get training sessions according to how fit you were. Now, I did complain about it because I was in the top group, and I felt we were training harder than other teams, when the doctor and the physios were saying, no, you're just training at the same level. But I didn't think that was fair, because I was doing a lot more training than other players that were much younger than me. But in terms of injury-wise, I was very fortunate. I never really had anything. One of the things I got from quite an early age was wearing ankle pads. I used to wear ankles. Because I was a player always running with the ball and dribbling and all that sort of thing, most of the injuries I was getting early on, even though it wasn't putting me out of the game, were sore ankles with people.
Slide tackles.
Slide tackles. That's what did it. Slide tackles. And so what happened was I started wearing ankle pads, and that made a big, big difference. It protected my ankles, and it meant that I could, after games, I had very little wrong with me after that.
Gordon, did you ever put on that 1.5 stone again?
Yeah, I put it back on again, but I got myself back playing again. But it was as I say, it was quite a serious thing. It was osteomyelitis. It was in my sort of groin area. It was the osteomyelitis. It's a bone marrow infection,
right.
And it's quite a strong illness, because I was in hospital for 3 weeks. You know,
Tony.
Well, I probably a couple of major injuries, but maybe 3 or 6 months. But I remember I was playing in an Edinburgh derby and at Tynecastle, and we were 3-0 up after about 30 minutes or more, and I got tackled by a guy. I remember Cammy Fraser at Hearts, and I went down, and of course I was lying just near the Hearts end, and it was bucketing down that night. You know, I'm lying at the Hearts end, and they're throwing things at me the whole lot, because we were 3-0 up after half an hour. And of course, one of the things in our days, the physios now are far better at the top level than ever were. In our days, it was really, the manager would put pressure on you, put pressure on the physio to say you were fit to play. So it didn't matter what you thought. There was a real moral compulsion you had to play. But anyway, I'm lying there. Now the Hearts fans are going mental. And they managed to just wheel me. I think I don't know who it was. A couple of people just grabbed my fucking ankle and wheeled me off at the side of the park, so I'm closer to the Hearts end. So anyway, they're calling for the Red Cross, and for some reason that night, they didn't have any stretchers. So I see this, I'm lying there in agony, and the game's going on, and I see this wee guy coming round with a wheelchair. Right, 2 wee guys. They must have something like a dad's army. So I'm lying there. The 2 wee guys come up with a wheelchair, and my playing weight was 14 stone, you can imagine. So they could hardly lift me. So eventually our physio was there as well, and they managed to get me onto this chair. And of course, because it was still on the grass, there was no traction between the wheels and the grass. So the wee guys tried to push me and they fucking threw me out. So I'm lying on the track at Tynecastle, and eventually I'm shouting, screaming at these guys. Eventually 2 big policemen came and they gave me a huckle. And they took me right round. Then, of course, I was out for about 6 or 8 weeks with a hairline fracture. But I think the big thing, and Davie alluded to it, and Gordon, is the mental health. And there's much more research done it now, you know. I know at the PFA in Scotland and England and other countries now, they have a welfare section. Because a lot of players feel really isolated when they get injured. And you're removed from the squad. You're very often in on your own. And nowadays the top clubs have got so many physios, but in our day generally there was one physio. So if there was a queue of people, you had to wait your turn. So it had a big sort of psychological impact. But nowadays they take much more cognizance of that. But it's a big area now for when players, particularly players who are on short-term contracts, they get a bad injury and they're worried if they'll be able to get another contract at the expiry date of their current contract. So it does have a big psychological impact on players.
It's an interesting one. When I was at Brighton, we sold the player Mick Robinson to Liverpool, and after first season was there was one day we came in and I came into the physio room and Mick Robinson was in there getting treatment. I was like, "Oh, you injured?" He goes, "Yeah, I injured." And I said, "What was bringing you down? You still got your house down here and all that?" He goes, "Liverpool don't treat you when you're injured." I was like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "They just tell you, we'll see you when you're fit again." That's true. The great Liverpool team of the 80s, that you to go and get your own treatment and then come back when you were 100% fit, and that's when you joined them in the training. I couldn't believe that, right? No treatment. Unbelievable.
Guys, you all played in derbies. Davie against your cousin, Murdo McLeod. And I'm talking about the Partick Thistle Rangers game here. That's the Glasgow derby. And obviously the Edinburgh derby, Hearts and Hibs as well, Tony. Stories about derbies. Did you enjoy the derbies?
I loved it, to be perfectly honest, because, you know, it was great atmosphere. Sides were pretty even in those days. And I think the thing is, like, you know, I played against my cousin, say, Murdo McLeod, and I remember Brian McGinley, the referee. When I was at Thistle and Tony was at Thistle, we used to go for beers after the game, remember, Saturdays, down to Glasgow, and Brian McGinley would suddenly appear and be our mate. Right? Yeah. So we had a good relationship with him, and I remember I was playing for Rangers against Celtic, and I was playing centre midfield, and Murdo, as I say, is my cousin, but he was dirty in those days, as I probably was, but he basically went right over the ball to me in midfield, right? So I'm lying there, and Brian McGinley's the referee. So Murdo comes up and whispers, "Davie," he says, "I thought you were Jimmy Nicholl." I said, "All right." So Brian McGinley comes up to me and whispers, he said, "Oh, that was a terrible tackle." He says, "I think I'm going to book him." I said, "It was mistaken identity, Brian." He said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I thought it was Jimmy Nicholl." He says, "Oh, I can't book him then." And I thought to myself, maybe I should have sent off. But that was what happened. And also, you mentioned Cammy Fraser there. When I came back, my knee injury was a 4-each game, basically, in Rangers Celtic at Ibrox. And it's torrential rain, sleet, everything. And I had to play a week after my injury, you know, my operation. And we're playing, and it's back, you know, back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. And then it's 3 each. And I'd been playing centre half, and I'd been watching Pat Bonner, and I actually have spoken about him since. And about 5 minutes earlier, Pat had come to a corner that Davy Cooper had taken and punched out to the edge of the box. And I thought, I'm going to stand there just in case he does it again. And he does it again. So I headed it back in, and it's under the bar, and it hits Cammy Fraser in the back, and he goes and claims it. Now, the Rangers News gave it to me, so it's sacrosanct. And also, they did a wee thing with technology now, and it actually showed that it was a yard over the line. So I'm claiming it. I didn't score many goals. So that was it. And then my last game for Rangers was against Celtic, Glasgow Cup final on a Friday night. Now, Graham Souness had come in and said to me, I need you to play. I know about your knee. He said, but we'll get you best treatment during the summer and I'll extend your contract. And I said, right, okay. So I played about 6-7 games. We got into Europe and the Friday night was Rangers against Celtic at Ibrox, Glasgow Cup final. And he calls me in early and he says, I see the doctor coming out of his office and he says, the doc doesn't think your knee's going to survive. I says, what do you mean? He said, I think you'll need to go part-time. I said, well, Rangers part-time? He said, no. He said, I'm not going to extend your contract because I can't take the chance. But when you play the night against Celtic, I'm saying to myself, right, so this is mid-May and we get paid to the end of May, right? So I know I'm getting a fortnight's wages and that's it. So anyway, I play. We beat Celtic 3-2. Ali McCoy scores a hat-trick. I actually set up 2 of his goals, which he acknowledges. And I'm going off the park, full house, and I know it's my last game for Rangers. So I'm getting a wee bit emotional. And all the players are saying, Davie, it's only the Glasgow Cup of win. It's nothing else. So anyway, so I'm the last man off the park. And I go in, Graham Souness announces to the team that that's me finished, my last game for Rangers. So I think, right, so I'm wearing number 4 that night. And as Gordon says, you weren't allowed to give away your jersey. So I get the jersey, I get my boots, and I'm walking along the corridor and the physio comes out and he says, Oi, where are you going with that jersey? And I said, it's mine, it's my last game, I'm taking it. You'll ruin a good set. I go, what? So my last tackle, he's pulling one sleeve, I'm pulling the other. And my last tackle at Rangers was when I kicked him between the legs and got my strip and walked out and I get paid for a fortnight and that was me finished. And it was the strangest thing, but would I change it? I don't think I would have changed it, so it was great.
Well, I'll tell you this. It's Friday night. I'm at dinner in Dunoon with Derek Johnson, right? And I'd already done my speech. Big Derek's doing his. He was doing a Q&A and he said to him about his relationship with Jock Wallace. He says, I remember we were playing against Celtic at Ibrox. He said, Big Jock, I was centre half. He says, Big Jock said to me, you need to watch Big Johannes Edvaldsen. He's good in the air. He's a danger. And all that. He says, first half, Johannes Edvaldsen scores 2 goals. Celtic are 2-0 up. Derek says, Jock Wallace, I will go me at half time. He says, right, you're going up front for the second half. He put me up front. He says, I scored for us. He says, we get 2 more goals. I can't remember who got them. He says, I think McDowell now. And I'm sitting there, I went, it was me that got the 2 goals. He couldn't even remember it was me. I says, I know it. It was my Old Firm debut. And we were 2-0 down at half time. And that was the first game Old Firm had played in. And he couldn't remember I got the other 2 goals right. I was like, thanks, Derek. But that was a great season in that respect. To score 2 goals when you're doing 2-0. Do you know what? He had a go at Big Derek at half time, but he was very positive to the whole team, saying, okay, we're losing 2-0, but we can win this game and all that. And I was delighted. Derek said he scored the first goal. He actually didn't. He got the second. I got the first. He got the second, and I got the winner. We won 3-2. But that season as well, I was fortunate enough to score the winning goal in a cup final. I mean, I'm famous for my missing the cup final in England, but in Scotland, I scored the winning goal against Celtic that year. In the last minute of extra time as well, I think with 2 minutes to go, I scored for us to win 2-1. So I've got the benefit of having scored. It's quite funny because I was once playing a game and the guy said to me, during the game, someone go at me, he says, would it not have been great to score a winning goal in a cup final, eh? And I went, I did. When? I says, well, you'll not remember. I says, it was 1978. And he goes, oh, that's before my time. I don't remember that. That's what football's like.
With Edinburgh Derby, it's probably the mini version of the Old Firm, but the intensity, certainly when I was a player, it used to be 40 or 50,000 at the games at Tynecastle and Easter Road. And during my time, I was quite fortunate. I had 9 seasons at Hibs, and I was only playing 1 losing team against Hearts. At that time, we were the sort of main team. I remember a game where we were 1-0 down in the 88th minute, and I was going up the left-hand side, and big Jim Jeffries come across and scythed me up, And so I'm lying there, and of course it was a heavy rain again that day. And I just turned round and I looked, and there's two Hearts fans run onto the park to have a go at me, So I got up the whole lot, and they were just about 5 yards from me, and the referee ran over. So I grabbed the referee and said, fucking deal with it. So the guy tried to hit the referee, but fortunately the police took him away. Remember those, they were wonderful scene if you think back in those days. Remember somebody run onto the park, then the policeman would stand up and they would take their hat off. They had these big coats on the whole lot, so it took them ages to arrive in the scene of the crime. But we took the free kick and we scored the equaliser. It was a header by a guy called Ali McLeod. Remember Ali? Ali would never head the ball in his life, but he scored the header, so that was a sort of equalising goal. But when Gordon mentioned Derek Johnson, I got on really well with Big Derek Johnson. He was a great character and great fun. And towards the end of his career, when Souness came in, his days were numbered, you know. And we were playing down at, we're playing Morton. I'd moved to Morton, bad injuries there, but playing against Rangers, and I think it was a League Cup tie or something. And Derek's playing, and I'm playing for Morton. And I was dead pally with a guy called David Francis. Do you remember David Francis, the commentator? He was a doyen of Scottish football. So I met him before the game in the wee area at Capello. And Big David said, "Oh, Tony, how you getting on, big fella? How you getting on? Well, you're in your 30s now, and how's the weight?" And of course, I'm saying to David, "That's me 17 stone now, David. Can't you lose a bucket ounce? I'm on that Derek Johnson diet sheet. It's no working for me at all." So Big Derek comes along as well, and I've told Derek the story. So he says David Francis again. "Oh, big fella, how are you? I was speaking to Big Tony there. What about you?" I said, "I'm the same. 17 stone, David. Can't lose an ounce." "Well, the thing is, you two guys need to stop eating. That's the only way you'll lose weight." So you don't think any more about it. But seemingly in the second half of that game, I've got the ball in midfield and I'm running forward. I'm looking for Big Andy Ritchie to play a 1-2. You know, that was some luck. But anyway, Big Derek steps out and knocks me in the ground. So I'm lying there, and at the same time, one of our midfield players tackles Derek Johnson's. So the two of us simultaneously are lying in the ground at Capello Park. And Big David's doing the comment and said, "Oh, the two big fat fellows are lying prostrate. 34 stone is lying in the ground at Capello Park." So he has to fill in this in about 30 seconds or a minute or so. He's going, "And they're calling for a stretcher. I need a GCB, get these two off the ground, you know." And everybody I met later on was saying to me, "I didn't realise you were 17 stones." I was listening to that game on the radio, you know. But then, and of course with Thistle, as David said at the time, in my 2 years at Thistle, I think we had beaten Rangers 3 or 4 times in 2 years in various tournaments. So it's quite we Bertie, as you know, played a very defensive regime. But they always had people like Duke Somner, a big Colin McAdam up front, who was great. And in fact, I remember, I think we lost 4-0. I was playing for Thistle against Rangers at Ibrox. And you remember, Davie, Big Ruffy always owed people money, you know. And still does. And Big Colin McAdam, who moved, he was one of the first tribunal players who went from Partick, Thistle to Rangers. And when the Rangers fans here, I remember, in his first season, Big Colin scored about 30 goals. You know, it was brilliant in there, the whole lot. And so Ruffy owed him something like 50 quid or something. So it was a corner for Rangers, and Big Colin McAdam come up. Remember Big Colin used to bounce up and down, you know. So I tried to upset him, said to Colin, "By the way, has Ruffy paid you back that money yet?" Big Ruffy's like, "Is it? You've not, right, Ruffy? Time you gave me that money back." Anyway, Davy Cooper swings in this magnificent in-swinger as he did. And Big Colin McAdam just bumped Big Ruffy into the back of the net, you know. And Big Colin standing over him. Big Ruffy's one knee down with the ball, and he says, "You see, if you want your money back, that's not the way to go about it." This was playing about 40,000 at Ibrox. You know, Big Ruffy was unflappable, wasn't he?
Tell you a story. Tell you a story about Big Ruffy. Brian Whittaker was always trying to get one over him, wasn't he? Brian was a lovely guy, and but Brian had lucky leopard skin underpants, and I can remember one day we were playing Celtic at Firhill, and the pitch was horrendous, torrential rain, and Brian was going out, and you know he loved the Savoy. Was you remember the Savoy? And he came in to the game. He had yellow luminous shorts on and pink luminous vest with espadillos on, and that was him coming into the game. And Bertie came in and went, "Oh no, look at him, right, you're fined, Whittaker. No suit on." So he's got his suit carrier. So next thing he takes off his gear and puts his suit back on, he's the white suit at the time. And basically what happened was he'd lucky leopard skin underpants. He used to wear them all the time. And so what happened was he went to the toilet and he put his leopard skin underpants up in the hook, and Big Ruffy was already dressed. He took his shorts down, took his slips down, got Brian's underpants and put them on, the leopard skin underpants. So anyways, we're playing Celtic, right? It's back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. And it's one each. And Big Ruffy saves a penalty and he's down in the mud and it's all over the place. And what happened in those days at Thistle was I used to go in the right post and Brian used to go in the left, and we used to kick a lot of balls off the line. And I remember there was a breaking play, and Brian's nickname was Piggy. Don't know why they call him Piggy, but anyway. So Ruffy, breaking play, Ruffy goes like that, pulls down his shorts, and he's got the leopard skin underpants, and he goes, "Piggy, do you recognise these?" And Brian goes mad, because that's his lucky underpants. And him and Ruffy are wrestling in the middle of the goal, and Brian's trying to get the underpants off him. The referee, I was the captain, Tony, so I got another 10 times, and the referee says, "What's going on here?" I said, "There was just a bit of fight over the penalty, but we'll sort it out, And we went in the dressing room after the game. It was said that it was one each, and it was a great performance against Celtic, and Ruffy takes the underpants off, puts them back in the hook, and Brian comes in, gets them, takes them into the washroom, gives them a wash and puts them back on under his pink luminous stuff, and he's away to the Savoy up there. And I met him, sadly Brian died in a car crash, and I met him, he was the Hearts commercial director, I think, at the time. And I said, "How you doing, Brian?" He said, "I no bad, Davie." I says, "You still get the lucky pants?" He went, "Oh, I said." He says, "Version number 2. He says, "I gave the old ones to Ruffy." I said, "The ugly bee needs all the luck he can get." And that was it. But that was the strange things that happened at Thistle, in the park.
Davey, we're getting close to the end here. We're running a wee bit out of time. Pre-season, you told me that stuff in the book pre-season. You guys must all have stories about tours that you were on over the years.
Well, I can tell because there's 2 ladies in the audience and they're my daughters, so I can say what happened. I made my debut for Rangers against St Etienne in a tournament in France, and I can also say who it was. Greggy said to me, "I want you to room with a legend," he says, "and he'll teach you all about Rangers." So again, and Alec Miller was there. And Alec is a good guy, very, very serious, but very devoted to everything. He gives everyone 100%. Good guy. So anyway, I'd had blisters from pre-season training. And next thing, there's a chap at the door, and Ray Simpson, the retired surgeon, is there, and he's in his bag, and he's got a sheet, a rubber sheet, puts it in the bed. He said, "Right, let's see these blisters." So I'm lying in the bed on this sheet, and he gets a scalpel. He says, "The best thing to do is just cut them open, let the pus and the blood go out, and you'll be sorted." He says, "I'll get them padded up for you tonight, and you'll be fit against St Etienne, right?" I said, "Right." So he does all that, and there's blood everywhere and everything. So he disappears, and Alex says, "I wouldn't let him do that." He said he was a brilliant surgeon in his time. He says, "But he's blind." So he said, "I wouldn't let him do that." So anyway, 2 minutes later, there's another chap in the door, and Alex says, "That's for you." I said, "What's going on?" So I got up to the door, and there's a waiter with a bucket of ice, and I'm thinking, "Oh, that's great, Alec, having a drink or something, And I said, "What's happened?" So he gets up and he says, "What we're going to do, Davey," he says, "I'm going to show you a trick that an ex-Rangers legend told me at the start of my career." He says, "And I'm 34 and I'm the fittest guy in the squad. He said, so it's getting me in good stead. And I'm like, okay, right. So go into the bathroom, so we sink, and he puts the ice in. And I think, well, I'm putting my feet in, surely. And next thing, he drops his shorts and his underpants, and he raises his testicles and puts them into the ice. And he says, he says, what I do before every game, he says, 20 minutes. He says, and what it does is it pulls them up, he says, and I can run freely during the game. He says, in fact, he says, why do you think I charge down free kicks? He said, because there's no chance anyway. So he says, I'll leave you to do it, right? Something. This isn't it, right? So I just go back in, leave it, go back in. He says, is that you sorted? I said, that's me sorted. So I go back in, and there's a pre-match before the game. And all the boys are saying to me, how did your eyes go? So it's a set-up, obviously. But I thought, goodness sake, but that was the kind of things that went on in those days.
Any stories, guys? Pre-season tours?
It's not so much a tour, but we when I was at Brighton, we got much better looked after than Rangers had ever done it. They used to, like, we had a players' lounge and all that thing, and even we used to get special. The buses used to take us to matches. We actually had stewards on the bus. It was like an aeroplane. We did people serving drink and food after the game on the bus, a table and everything. It's unbelievable. And I'll never forget one day, I tell you the year 1984, I know that for a fact. We got a brand new bus. It was up market, one of the best buses I've ever been on. But it also had a cassette player with a big screen, TV screen on it. We could watch things. And it was the first time we'd done it. The driver had brought along a tape, right? And the tape was Top of the Pops. So we're all watching this tape, Top of the Pops. Number one were Wham, right? And when they finished saying, one of the boys, Neil Smiley, Specky, we used to call him, turned around and said, they're going to split up soon. We're like, they're number one. He goes, now they're splitting up. He says, George Michael's the talent. And originally doesn't even sing, by the way. He just pretends he's singing. They're making it a duet. George Michael's going to go in his own, and he wants to sing in his own. But really? Because I'll tell you, I think nobody knows. George Michael's gay. And I was the one that said, he's in the paper every week with different women. He says, that's a PR company. They don't want the fans to know he's gay. And Steve Forster, the captain, says, Specky, who's told you all this shit? He says, Elton John. Best answer ever to who's told this shit, because he'd been at Watford, this boy, right, where Elton John was the owner. That's how he knew all this. So none of us, not one of us came back and went, all right, we were like, okay. Now the thing was, the finish of the story was, in 1999, George Michael got caught in the toilets in America. If you remember, it was a big case. It made the papers and all that. And he came out with a statement and he said, I've realised for the last 10 years that I'm gay. I thought, that's funny, I knew 5 years before you did.
But pre-season or the tours, they were always interesting because when I was at Hibs, we always went to Scandinavia. And the reason they took us there because they take us to a wee remote village because the alcohol was about £10 for a bottle of beer. That's going back 30 years ago or something. So it always took us. But just before I left, we went to Ireland one year for a wee change. And I think we were playing in Waterford in a game, a friendly. And after the game, we went into this pub, we had the night off and the next day off. We played sort of 3 games in 5 or 6 days. I remember going into the pub and sitting there, and there was a famous dog race every year in Ireland. I forget what they call it anyway. All the dogs are parading round before the event, and the wee commentator saying, and there's all the dogs looking fit and tanned after their holidays. Well, I'm sitting there with Jackie McNamara and Pat Stanton, lots of laughing at me, but not a titter. Then again, he comes back on again, the commentator says, there's no dog won this race twice. There's one dog's won it 3 times. And of course, we're just all right. Not an acknowledgement, but in terms of the Thistle one, I don't know if you were there, Davie, when we Dixie come back, Dixie Deans, the Celtic centre forward. Dixie was a great practical, was the rooming. Would you remember the classic when we played, I forget who it was, at Brother or something? And we won 5 or 6-0. Was that? And there was wee Dixie running through. Do you remember he was kidding on he was injured? And he sort of goes down and he's like that. The goalie was a big Celtic fan. So Dixie's on through and the goalie, a big Celtic fan. And the goalie runs out and rather than getting the ball, he said, you all right, Dixie? Dixie gets up and knocks the ball into the net, Remember was it the water? Remember the water?
Aye, it's pouring the rain.
I was pouring the rain and he put Dixie had put, I think he put the tap on, and the warm water was absolutely roasting, And Dixie, because it was heavy rain, he was throwing out this water, having a great laugh about it. And then eventually the water was boiling and they threw this water out and suddenly hear us cry, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" Of course, that somebody had been hit by the boiling water, and the police came in. The police came to the hotel, didn't they? And we Dixie blamed the two young guys next door. The officer, these two young guys did it. Just leave them alone. Leave them alone. You know, they're only young, only breaking through. Just give them a wee chance. They'll not do it again. The whole lot. You know, well, we better come up to the room with a big sergeant. You know, I come up. Yeah. But the pre-seasons were good.
Guys, Tony, if you hang on to that wee second, because we do need to wrap up. We've run over already. I wanted to ask you all just to off script here entirely. Gordon is the patron of Walking Football Scotland. Davie's a new convert the last 6 months or so playing walking football. And Tony, you don't know it yet, but you're signed up. Walking football has a profound impact on people's lives. We know that now. Across Europe, it's the fastest growing sport in the world. And yesterday I was supposed to be doing a talk with Mel Young, who started the big issue and who invented the Homeless World Cup.
Yeah.
And some of the stories from it are absolutely incredible, life-changing for people that take part and watch. What do you guys think is special about our beautiful game that can have that impact on people's lives?
Well, I served on the SPFL Trust for about 10 years, you know, and that's the initiative that takes place. And all the community clubs have a foundation wing or a charity wing. I remember speaking at a conference in Paris about 10 years ago or something like that, and it was about the good that football does on a European basis. You know, if you remove yourself from the game itself, you know, there's a lot of projects in different parts. And I remember I was in Paris talking about it, and there was two clubs at that event, Celtic and Montrose. And both of them had won awards for the work of their foundations. And I think the Celtic one was about creating employment in the East End of Glasgow. And the Montrose one was working on a very similar scale, a smaller scale, but in the same type of objectives, trying to get the community engaged. And the clubs, all the clubs in Scotland, I think, bar none, who are in the senior clubs, do something on a local basis. I know the one at Firhill was really great. They have the meal for the homeless every year, I think, through the Christmas events, and also for older people as well. So the trusts in Scotland work really well. They work in conjunction with each other in some projects, but also work very well in terms of the locality. They try and identify what the issues are in that area and deliver some service to it. Because certainly it's quite important when council budgets have been curtailed in the last couple of years. So it's a great boon in the local initiatives.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, I agree with what Tony says about all the work that's done in the communities and all that for football. In terms of the walking football side, the reason I became a patron is, and it's growing rapidly for men and women, and it's the fact is it's right up to different age groups as well, which is tremendous, because normally, most of us, like, as players, were out the game in our 30s. That we don't play on, and what happens is you miss that element of getting together in a group and have a chat and have friendships with people and all that. That goes, and it's a very tough thing to actually accept, because you're so used to it and that camaraderie that comes with it as well, friendships and everything, and your relationships. It's the hardest thing in the world when you have to stop doing it, and that's why walking football is great from that point of view, because it brings it back. Normal football can't be played on by people because it's too much in terms of the physicality of it. But at least a walking football, most people can enjoy it. And even last week there, I was at a tournament, and it was people with Parkinson's that were playing. Everybody was basically with Parkinson's, and that just shows you that even with an illness like that, you can actually still have your camaraderie, you have your friendship, and work with people in the football side. And that's why football's so important for it, and that's why it's been such a great game over the years. I've missed my playing side of it. I enjoyed it so greatly, and you miss, as I say, that relationships and the stories we've got. Most of the stories have come from those days playing football. It's very, very hard to find things happening normal, because even when I went to work for a company after I stopped playing in London, and they took me aside and told me I had to stop giving people abuse, and I was doing it for a laugh. I was making jokes about people and things like that, because we were so used to that. That was the sort of life we were used to, that you couldn't help but somebody trying to take the piss out of you all the time, and you did it with other people and all that. And in the normal life, that doesn't always happen. So that's why we need to continue to support the football game at all different levels.
I agree 100%. This time we're going to do some questions, I think.
Yep.
Just need one of these things.
Yeah. You talk now.
Ah, but there's nothing on this.
Right.
You're okay.
It's loud enough.
Hear that one? Yeah.
Any questions, guys? Here we go.
Anyway, probably.
Hi, Gordon. Davie, firstly, it's great to see you looking so well after what you've been through.
Thank you very much.
Terrific. My son will be absolutely thrilled to hear that slide tackles are a crucial part of the game. I've spent the last 2 or 3 years telling him that slide tackles just means you're dead slow. So, so he'll be thrilled with that. As Gordon would know as well, he's helped us out with our youth football club. So I wouldn't mind touching on maybe a wee bit of your background in youth football. I know obviously you moved from Glasgow United, but we look after a boys team, and I've got a 14-year-old boy and twins who are both heavily involved in the game. And just in a week where we find out that again, no minutes for players under 21 for 4 or 5 of our top clubs in the country is quite alarming. And I don't mean to pick on Celtic as an example because they're a well-run club, but we look at James Forrest getting an extension and contract, a guy who played an average of 20 minutes a game every week, and Ben Doak has to go to England to get his opportunity. So I just wonder what your thoughts are about maybe your background and how it worked well and how you guys got opportunities at a young age, which is just fundamentally not happening now.
Well, I think the big thing, I don't know if you hear me, is the reserves. Because, you know, when I was at Arsenal, most of my career was in the reserves. But you were playing against, you know, big names. You know, you were playing against men. And you would, as Gordon said, you used to get stick from players on the pitch. But it made you play. And it was tough. I don't quite understand what's happened in Scottish football now, because I think that, you know, you need the reserves fixed, you know, sort of tournament where you play against teams and you play against the reserves. Because what happens in the reserves is that you've got a lot of players that are maybe injured coming back. I remember, and it toughens you up, I remember I came up to Dundee and there was 2 guys called Peter Dixon, member of Queen of the South, and the boy who was the coach at Rangers, who was the HMRC tax. Aye. Peter McLaren, was it? No.
Billy McLaren.
Billy McLaren, right. So I can remember playing in the reserves against these 2 guys, right? And they kicked me up and down the park. And I had a shot and I scored. And I get back to the halfway line and one punched me and one kicked me somewhere. And you think, well, that's terrible, but it really toughens you up because you realise that, you know, you were in a game. You knew that you had to give 100% and it had to be very, very physical. I think what happens now is that the programmes with the youngsters, they don't have that experience. And also one of the things, just to say, is I was chief executive on Morton, and we brought a guy in from Rangers who was one of the best players I've ever seen in my life, called Josh McPake. And I thought he should be playing the first team. And I said to him, why, you know, in the first team? He said, because I was told that I'm not good enough. And I think we make decisions in players far too early. So I think that's what it is.
Questions? Yep.
Yeah. Look, guys, thanks for a great afternoon. You concentrate an awful lot on the pitch. The off the pitch really interests me, and I think back in those days, Scottish football ran very much like corner shops and no like businesses. Can you tell us any experience you had with in the boardrooms, maybe the biscuit tin mentality at Celtic or any other clubs that maybe you could tell the guys that you've experienced over your time?
One of the problems I had mainly was it's at SFA. I found it a real problem because when I got offered the job, I didn't realise that I could make decisions. I was frustrated by that because I hadn't done my due diligence to know that. All I could do was make recommendations, and then it went to a committee or a board, and the number of times they turned down things that I thought were going to help the game, help develop the game, and they would just say, no, we don't want that, we don't want that, we don't want change and all that. It was the toughest thing. I got very frustrated by it. And that's a big problem with the game at that level. It's just that some of the people just, I don't understand whether be this attitude of it, they don't like change. Because I even went to at one time, and two things I tried to do was change the season runners to shut down during January and February and have a winter break like that and then play. And you'll never believe this, I actually suggested we finish the season in June, and somebody at the meeting said, June, Gordon, it's too warm to play in Scotland in June. That's true. I went, they played Spain in June, but they can't play in Scotland in June, right? That's the frustration of it. It's unbelievable. The other one I said as well was, and this got rejected quite a few years ago, that you've got League One and League Two in Scotland. I said, why don't you have League One North and League One South? So you regionalise it and the teams play there. And what you do is you put the 6 most northerly Premier League teams in League One North, and they call them the B teams, and the 6 most southerly ones, B teams. And what happens is all the B teams have to play their matches at the stadiums of the other clubs. So every team then would have 30 league games a season, 21 home games and 9 away games. They voted against it. And I was like, why? And they said, and one of the reasons they said was, all the publicity will go to the B teams. They'll get all the footage and all that. And I went like, what publicity do you get just now in your leagues? You'd make more money and you'd have less travel and all that. And they voted it out. That's the hardest thing in football is to try and get any creation of development. And that's why we're talking about the youth system there as well. I'm totally against how they run youth systems as well. A lot of the clubs even release boys far too young as well. You know, they make their decision when they're like 13, 14, all that sort of thing. And I'll tell you a quick story on that one before. When I was out in UEFA, a meeting, and the guy who was in charge of the UEFA youth thing, he'd been at Ajax. And he told me, he says, we used to make a decision when every boy at 14 was when we made our crucial decision about whether somebody was good enough or not. He said, but we then decided that was too young. He said, what we did was we kept every boy at the club till they were 18 and then made the decision. And I said, did boys come through that would have been released at 14? He went, yeah. He says, MD, I would know. He says, you might know one of them, Dennis Bergkamp. He said, right. At 14, he would have been released under the old system. At 17, he was in the Ajax first team. At 18, he was in the international team. And at 14, it wouldn't have been good enough. That's how bad it is. And I think the youth development in this country needs to be improved.
Gordon, I can back that up because we've got guys in the over 70s team who are just coming into their prime now.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the issues that I know that in Scottish football is, or maybe the amateur clubs, you know, when I was a kid, I played with Glasgow amateurs, and people like Kenny Burns and Frank Gray emerged from that group at the time. And that was a good level to play at. But the clubs now are trying to source players, as you know, from 6, 7 and 8 at a very early stage. And players develop at a different age at a different time. Their physicality can be different. You know, a lot of guys maybe grow from 13 to 16, lose a lot of their strength and re-emerge a bit later. So everybody's body development is different. And I know there is a lot of people in Scottish football at the boys' club level, think there's far too many clubs taking too many players, then discarding them at 14 and 15 and 16 as ostensibly failures. But you see the likes of Andy Robertson and Aaron Hickey and people like that, they're guys that have proved against the system, you know. So I think there has to be some streamlining done. But Gordon's right as well, because I used to deal with the SFA when I worked in Scotland many years ago. And if you exempt Walker and Farry to a degree, no other chief executive has any real power to force things through. It's not a chief executive who would exist in a different company where they have a force of nature or the personality to push things through. The big clubs don't let them now, you know. They don't let them do that now. So there is a real worry, and those figures from the SFA are quite worrying. Now, I think that was a really good report, but the real test will be, will they do anything about it? That'll be the big thing in the forthcoming years. Will they change things? I don't know.
We've got time for one more question. We're going to take a big risk here and ask it's two. One of the Celtic supporters here. One of the two that I can see in here. Joe.
Thanks for a great afternoon, guys. I've got a question for you, Davie, if that's okay. You made a kind comment about the academic intelligence of Tony and Gordon earlier on. I just wanted to ask about when you finished your playing career, you've gone on to have a really successful career in the boardroom and in your business life. I just wanted to ask what it was that gave you a strong foundation and gave you the confidence to go on, because obviously you're a very driven and successful guy and full of confidence. So what was it that set you up to be able to, after your playing career finished, to make a success of yourself?
Thank you very much, and I'll pay you later on. It's a bit one of these strange things in fate. As I said, I got a knee injury and had to go part-time when I was 29, just going on to 30. And generally that happens 5-6 years later. But what happened was I managed to get a job with Tenants in the managed house division, the pubs that they owned. And one of the things I discovered, and this is something I think that the three of us have looked at very closely, is the fact is there's significant transferable skills for players. And it's very difficult for them to get into business. And one of the things I quickly realised was that it was about teamwork, and it was also about having been driven for results. And when I went into Tenants, my sort of peers were guys that had been in since they were 17, 18, and their mindset was they didn't want to change. But I was looking for new opportunities, and I looked at the pub estate and thought, this has to change. We have to look at other things. So we, started getting involved in changing pubs to O'Neill's, theme pubs, J&R Tennant, All Bar One, all that thing, and trade started to move up. So that was what gave me my grounding. And also, I was moving up the ranks at Tenants, and they said to me, well, you're been identified as a director of the company, but you can only get a directorship if you've got a degree. So I had to go back to night school. So I was part-time, I was training 2 nights a week and going to Paisley University 2 nights a week. I did that for 4 years. But for me, it was just about, being driven. I wanted to be better than I'd been. I wanted to make sure that I maximised my opportunity in life, and I did that. I then got involved a lot, bought my own pub company, 44 pubs and hotels with 3 others. I was headhunted for that, and then we sold it for a lot of money, and then I wanted to come back into football. And a man sitting there was instrumental, Jerry Dunn, Clyde Football Club, very famous man, his family are great, the Clyde Football Club. Jerry actually phoned me after we'd sold the pub company and said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I don't know. He said, why don't you go back into football? And I worked with Clyde. I was commercial director there for 3 years, and it was a great education because I realised, because of my football knowledge and my business knowledge, I was able to sort things. And one of the things that is clear in anything is that in football, there's 2 languages. There's a language of the boardroom and a language of the dressing room. And what you have to do as a chief executive, understand both languages and join all that up, ensure that everybody within a football club understands what their objectives are and what influence they can make in success. And that was one of the things I successfully did in football, and with a lot of success at clubs. And also, I'll be honest with you, and it's maybe a wee bit critical, but there are far too many people in football at the moment that are not football people. They don't understand the game, and what they think is they can use commercial values. They don't join up the football side. They ignore it completely. And that's to the detriment of the club, because unless you've got football sorted and football maximising the opportunity within a club, the rest is superficial. It doesn't matter how many commercial deals you get. See, if you're not doing it in the park, you can forget it. And that's what the problem, I think, is now. And I think there's a lot of it's been fashionable for people to go to night school to learn how to be a chief executive in football. And like the 3 of us get phone calls for certain people that have gone through that. They've gone to university to get not a degree, but a qualification in how to run a football club. And then they think they just go in. And it's not as simple as that. And I'll just finish then about how that worked. I was at Kilmarnock as the chief executive, and the bank said we had to lose £1 million off the playing budget. Now, that sounds great, but see if you don't get the manager involved and get him to buy in, you can forget it. So I was fortunate. Jim Jeffries, very experienced manager there. I said to him, Jim, the bank want us to lose £1 million. He said, all right. He says, oh, they'll pull the plug. I says, well, the club's got a lot of debt, so they want to reduce it. He said, right, okay, well, we'll stop that. And what we did was we completely overturned the plan, moved a lot of players on, brought a lot of players in. And Jim Jeffrey said to me, it's going to take 3 or 4 years for us to get back, because they were finishing 3rd and 4th in the league. And it was 3 or 4 years before it got back in. But I went to a board meeting once, and one of the new types of directors said, aye, I've been looking at the internet. He said, they're wanting rid of Jeffries. The fans are wanting rid of Jeffries. And the chairman was Sir John Orr at the time, ex-Strathclyde Police. And he said, well, Mr. McKinnon's a football guy. I asked him. And I said, well, I tell you, let's look at the facts. He said, £1 million off the wage bill. We've got a buy-in for the manager and we're negotiating that. I said, we've got 15 injuries. I said, so I've spoken to the physiotherapist and these injuries will come back in the next 2 weeks. So we'll get that sorted. I said, and the boy said, well, if we don't win the next 2 games, I vote to get rid of him. Who's with me? And if there wasn't a football guy in the room, Jim would have got the sack, which was a disgrace. So anyway, so it was all sorted out and they bought into it. And what happened was Jim and I were on the same wavelength. So he came into the end, he was always coming in at the end of the meeting. And I used to go out and get him. And he said to me, right, what's going on? I said, you need to win your next 2 games. Right, okay. So he comes in and he says, let me start, gentlemen. As he said, we've had 15 injuries, but spoke to the physio. We're getting them back. I think we've got 4 games coming up. When we get these players back, we're going to win 4 games. We don't need to win 2. We're going to win 4. So is everybody with me? Yes, we're all with them. And that's it. It's playing games, but it's understanding the language of the press room and the boardroom. So it's a bit of a rant, sorry, but I'm really passionate about it.
I think we've just got a glimpse of Davie's new book coming out next year. Last question, we're out of time, guys. So time for
very quick comment. My name's Scott Anders. I just want to say a wee story very quickly. I walked through the sludge and the grime yesterday and with wet feet and ended up here actually looking for the toilet and walked in here seeing a setup and being an inquisitive sort of person. I asked, what's going on here? And I met Mr. McKinnon, David, and he invited me to come along today. And now I hate to say this, I'm a rugby guy.
A what?
Yeah, exactly. But I've learned quite a bit today about, I'm from the west of Scotland as well, so obviously I've got a bit of football in my background too. But the similarities are great. But I would just, the previous speaker there from the floor, he mentioned the intelligence that's come across. We always say in rugby terms, the gentleman playing a hooligan's game and the hooligans playing the gentleman's game and all that stuff. But came across very, very big today for me. And I am very, very pleased. I dropped a few things and came along this afternoon on David's invite. And I thank you for that. And gentlemen, that was great.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you.
Will you wrap up for us, Davie? Will you wrap up for us, Davie? Yes? You want a good mic? Want more mic?
Well, listen, thank you so much. One of the things that the three of us likes talking is talking about football because it is a passion and we love it. And someone said to me, do you want back into the game? No, I don't. I don't know what you think, but I'm a wee bit sick of it because, as I said, there's people in the game making decisions that I don't agree with. I think that, we could do great jobs at, imagine having your own club. I said that once to Chirk Young, imagine your own club and you can you can lay it out as you see fit. That's got to be the ideal, isn't it? So get yourself into your wallet, Gordon. Get a club sorted. But it's great. It's very passionate, and as I say, really appreciate you all coming, and I hope it was of interest to you, and we greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
From the pitch to the boardroom, we tell so deep. Davie MacKinnon, secrets you keep. Slide tackle sharp, decision so bold. Story of a legend, let it unfold. Slide tackles and boardroom battles, oh what a ride. Years on the field, now business side. In every chapter, grit and glory blend. Here's to the defender, in the journey, my friend. From grass-stained shorts to a suit and tie, trading greenfield views for a CEO sky. Tackling life's challenges, both great and small. Davie's got wisdom ready for us all. Slide tackles and boardroom battles, oh what a ride. Years on the field, now business side. In every chapter, grit and glory blend. Here's to the defender, in the journey, my friend. From grass-stained shorts to a suit and tie, trading greenfield views for a CEO sky. Tackling life's challenges, both great and small. Davie's got wisdom ready for us all. Slide tackles and boardroom battles, oh what a ride. Years on the field, now business side. In every chapter, grit and glory blend. Here's to the defender, in the journey, my friend. Slide in the mud, then sit in the chair. Navigating boardrooms with just as much flair. From football to finance, a seamless switch. Davie's guide, life ain't no glitch. Autobiography packed with tales untold. Adventures and lessons both fierce and bold. Turn each page, let the legend inspire. Davie's story sets the spirit on fire. Slide tackles and boardroom battles, oh what a ride. Years on the field, now business side. In every chapter, grit and glory blend. Here's to the defender, and the journey, my friend.